Okay, so last class we covered, we just started out in conformity and understanding why people conform, what is going on in terms of making the decision to go along with the crowd. And we're going to talk more about that today. What kind of factors are in place to make you more likely to conform, and what factors could be in place to make you less likely to conform. And then, so remember, we're all about the context, right? So social psychology is all about the context, all about trying to figure out why people make certain decisions to behave a certain way. So last class, we talked about this idea behind private acceptance and public compliance. And private acceptance is when you really believe whatever it is that you're doing. So it might be that you are not sure about a particular situation, and so you follow along because you think that must be the way to do it. And so that private acceptance is you. If somebody were to ask you, well, what's the right way to act, you would say, well, it must be this way because of informational social influence telling you that other people are doing it that way. Kind of like if I were to say, and we've used this example last class, if you've never eaten sushi before, you go to a restaurant and you eat some sushi by following what other people are doing, and kind of following what, like, their process and their behaviors. If somebody were to ask you, well, what's the proper way to eat sushi, then you would explain that way that you did it, because you assume that's probably the right thing to do, and that's the right way to do it. And so what that is private acceptance. You're like, I believe that's the way to do it. Now, public compliance doesn't always mean that you believe that's the right way to do things. Public compliance is you complying with other people, conforming to whatever standard you see set, and you may not agree with exactly what is being done, but you are just doing it to conform to the group. So public compliance doesn't always mean that you believe what you're doing is right, or you believe what you're saying is correct. Public compliance just simply means you're kind of going along. Remember, so private acceptance is, do you believe what it is that you're doing is right? And then public compliance is going along even if you don't believe that's the right thing that you're doing. Informational social influence usually does result in private acceptance because you don't really know, and so you're going along with what information you have at the time. And we're going to talk about an example where some things don't match, where you sometimes have a privately held belief that you're not actually expressing, but you're complying with the opposite way. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. And so when it comes to conforming, there's a lot of reasons why we end up conforming. And one of the factors that sort of predicts our likelihood to conform is how important it is, the thing that you're doing. Okay. And so there's been several experiments on this, looking at what kind of factors can we set up in an experiment where a person would be more or less likely to conform. Okay. And so in this particular experiment, what they did was they set up this eyewitness testimony experiment. So they had people come in and look at a lineup. Okay, so something like this, okay? And they had to pick out the perpetrator, right? So they got to pick the bad guy, that, they of whomever, what they think was, they're pretending to be an eyewitness, and they're given, maybe a gritty video of a crime or something, and then they have to identify the person from a lineup. Okay. And so remember, this is an experiment. You have people who are, just going along, they just show up. They're like, okay, well, I'm getting class credit, or I'm getting extra credit to do this experiment, so I'm just going to show up and do whatever, whatever the study is about. And so what happens is that in the actual experiment, they're trying to kind of mimic an eyewitness sort of situation where you witness an event and then you've got to pick out the perpetrator. So in this case, what it is that The participants are asked to pick out a perpetrator out of that lineup, kind of similar to what you just saw that picture. And so there's 13 tasks. So the first set, the participants were shown a slide of a man who they're told is the perpetrator. And then next they see this slide, this lineup composed of 4 men. And one of those people is the actual perpetrator. So one is the person that they're supposed to pick out. And sometimes in the lineup, the perpetrators dress differently. Sometimes they're dressed the same. And the job is for the participant is to pick out that whoever matches, right? So they made the task, the researchers made the task really difficult. They made it really hard by presenting the slides really, really quickly. And so it became sort of ambiguous because the participants only saw the slides for about a half a second. So you see the perpetrator and then you see this lineup and then, you're trying to match these two, but you don't really have a lot of information to go by because they're doing this so quickly. And so you don't have time to sit and examine everything. So they did this for 2 groups. Okay. So they had one group, the experiment was the same for both groups, but one group was marked high importance and one group was marked low importance. So they manipulated one variable across the 2 groups. And that was the amount that they paid, right? The person. So they said, okay, if the participant, if the participant was paid a lot of money to do the task, in this case, $20, every time they accurately identified the perpetrator, okay, then that was considered the high importance group. Okay. And another thing that the participants were told was that they're developing this task for like a real, like, we're trying to do this on a bigger scale. So there's a lot of importance placed on this. Every accurate identification resulted in, money, and they had to, try to do their best on the activity. Now there was another group, and this other group wasn't paid anything and was just told, this is just a regular experiment. Okay, just do whatever, do the best you can, right? And so that group was deemed as low importance. So they weren't paid for, accurate identification. They weren't told this is going to be used to develop a bigger scale study. They were just told it is what it is. Okay. So what the difference was between the two was level of importance. Now, do you guys remember what a person, if we have a person who's in on the experiment, what that person is called? So we have participants, and then we have these people who are in on the experiment. Very good. It's actually on the slide, right? It's a Confederate, right? So a Confederate is a person who, yep, very good. Getting a lot of good answers on here. Confederate is the person who's in on the experiment, and the participant doesn't know that. Okay. The participant does not know that this other seemingly, innocent looking person, right? Other participant, they think, is in on the experiment. This person's a Confederate. And the idea is that we have Confederates sometimes because we want a particular manipulation and we want to influence our participants. So sometimes everybody's a Confederate and we only have one participant. Sometimes we have a bunch of participants and only one Confederate, and lots of mixes in between, just depending on what it is that, are we trying to manipulate a crowd? Are we trying to manipulate one person? Are we trying to use a crowd to manipulate a person? What are we trying to do? So in this case, we had groups in this experiment. There are groups where there is a Confederate who is consistently giving incorrect answers. And the question is does the participant conform to what the Confederate is doing? So it's this really quick task. You don't have time to really identify the people, right? So it's ambiguous. In some groups, it's a really important task. And in other groups, it's really low importance task. So what situation is it going to be where a participant, where a person, regular person, is going to choose to conform versus not choose to conform? Okay. So in this case where we had the person who was in the high importance group, They were much more, and we already got the answer here. The group that saw the experiment as high importance, they conformed. They were much more likely to conform when they felt like there was a lot on the line. Okay. When the group, was low importance group was watching the Confederates give the wrong answers, they didn't have anything to lose. They're just like, oh no, I mean, that's not right. It's this guy. So even though the task was slightly ambiguous, it was a hard task. Okay. The low importance group, very unlikely to conform because really there's not a lot at stake there, right? Okay. They're just like, oh, it's fine. It's this correct answer. Whereas the high importance group, they are more concerned with getting it right, but okay, they want to be sure. So they're going to go along with the Confederate because they want to make sure that what they're saying is, because it's so important, they want it. They're like, maybe I'm mistaken. Let's go with what this Confederate's saying because they seem confident in their answer, right? So when there's a lot of, it's very important and it's, a lot riding on it, a person's going to be more likely to conform because then they start questioning themselves. They start saying, well, am I right? Maybe I misunderstood the task. And they start getting confused. The low importance group, there's not a lot of cognitive dissonance there. They're like, oh no, the answer is this. They don't really have anything to lose. So they're not going to conform. They're going to go ahead and be honest with the answer. And they were like, I don't think that I misunderstood this task. I think that this person's wrong, So when the task is very important, you're going to be much more likely to conform. So it's a particular context where we will go with the crowd because we think, well, this must be a really important thing and I don't want to mess this up. Does that make sense? So when you don't want to mess it up, you're going to be more likely to go with somebody who seems confident, even though there's no private acceptance there. You don't think that it's right. You are going to go along with it because it's a really important task. Now, there are cases when informational conformity is going to backfire. Okay. So there's a fun video here, and this is a funny video from the show Scrubs. So if you've ever watched that, you'll enjoy this YouTube video, and it's something that happens in ERs all the time. So in this particular clip, they're talking about I think it was E. coli or food poisoning. It was something that it was like something on the news that was happening, and then when that happens, people freak out. Okay. So a contagion is when you have a rapid spread of emotions or behaviors through a crowd. So think about it this way. You're in an ambiguous situation, okay? And you're in a crowd and you're in a big crowd. And then everyone starts freaking out, right? Nobody knows the root cause for why the first freak out happened, but because everybody is freaking out, it starts to become, the emotion becomes contagious, and people will conform to these behaviors or emotions. And we'll also see this happen as somebody starts like running from something. Again, it's a contagion. These behaviors become contagious, where a person actually will run because they don't know why other people are doing it, but it must be that something's going on, right? So people tend to, in really ambiguous situations, rely on the interpretation of others. And a lot of times this interpretation is wrong or potentially dangerous, right? And we talked about this in cases of like, it's a survival tactic, right? So if everybody's, you see a crowd running in this particular direction, you're not going to run opposite of them towards the potential danger. You're going to run with them away from it because, it's been kind of ingrained in our species to do that. Now, the problem is that those people who might be engaging in those behaviors where they start freaking out, or they have like, a behavior that could be potentially dangerous, that can be a problem if the start of that was misinformed. So if it started with the first couple of people and they're overreacting or they're reacting inappropriately, okay, that can spread things in a dangerous way. I'll give you guys an example. So during the Vietnam War, there was a particular case where there was a group of soldiers who were in a village. And when they were in the village, there was some commotion, and some of the soldiers sort of like were spooked, and they started firing and with their guns and killing village members. So people who weren't armed, women and children, they started to open fire. Well, what happened was, this was only a couple of people that started opening fire. Well, the other group of soldiers who didn't understand what was going on, they walked into this misinterpreted behavior and emotion and misinterpretation of the situation, and they started opening fire on the village because they thought, well, I don't know what's going on, but they're firing and I'm just going to follow them. And what ended up happening is lots of people in the village, almost the whole village, was massacred because of this misinterpretation. And and we're going to talk about in a minute how we kind of stop and think, like, is this the right decision? But oftentimes in an ambiguous situation, especially scary situations, we just don't think, we just act. I've got a comment here. Hold on, let me look at this real quick. Okay, so would it be an example of contagion where people get frightened just because other people are, even though they weren't initially? Yes, this does happen. I worked in a haunted house in October. I saw several people jump seconds after the people who I actually scared. Yes. So riots and these kinds of, and I've got that example here, riots and these examples of fear contagion. Absolutely, this is contagious. And especially when you're in a high emotion situation, that could potentially cause, your first misinterpreted emotion is going to be fear if you're in a fearful situation, right? So if you're in a haunted house already, that is a emotion that you're going to experience or expect to experience. Now that contagion becomes very, very clear and very easily spread because everyone's already kind of at this high anxiety level. Now, another example of contagion is something called mass psychogenic illness. And so this is an example, it's an extreme example of misdirected informational social influence. Okay. And that's really where this clip comes in, which is really, it's a funny clip. It's making fun of a really real thing that happens because it's a, like a comedy show. But it's a really interesting clip. I want you guys to take a look at it when you get a chance. And so what mass psychogenic illness is when a group of people actually experience physical symptoms where there's no cause, there's no physical cause. And so this is an example where you have where they call it kind of like mind over matter, where you start to kind of feel like sick when there's no reason for you to feel sick. And in some cases, it's a misinterpretation of a particular symptom. Okay. And so when you have an ambiguous situation where you don't understand what's going on, we do our best to try to explain as best we can. And in some cases that becomes a mismatch and it's wrong. Okay. So I'll give you an example. In 1998, there was a teacher in Tennessee who reported a gasoline smell in her classroom. Now, they evacuated the school. Okay. Over 170 teachers, students, and staff reported symptoms of headaches, nausea, dizziness, which is the same symptoms that you would experience with a gas leak. Okay. Now, they found nothing. They found nothing in the school. There was no smell. Okay. As soon as they reported back that there was no gas leak, that there was no smell, nobody could go in and do it. Okay. All the mysterious illnesses went away. Everybody's cured. Okay. It's kind of like a placebo effect. That's exactly kind of like what happens is you, the power of the mind is extremely, it's crazy. It's powerful. You can sort of experience symptoms with no actual cause and no real like explanation, just by sort of convincing yourself. So those 170 people experienced physical symptoms with no root cause. And as soon as an explanation was given, their illness went away. They were no longer nauseated. They were no longer, dizzy, nothing like this. And there's actually a report on it here where you can see that, there's this mysterious fumes, sick in almost 100 in this high school, right? And it's like, this happens in lots of situations where somebody reports a smell or reports something, and in essence, what happens is that there's no explanation, there's no root cause, and then once an explanation is given, oh hey, this didn't, you guys are fine. What ends up happening is that the side effects go away. So one way to cure a mass psychogenic illness is to give an explanation, okay? Because it's rooted in misinformation, it's rooted in mystery. And so when you can clear that up, you can clear up this psychogenic illness. When we look at what is the root cause of contagions and things like that, a lot of times it's mass media. So mass media can be good and bad, right? It has it can play a powerful role in spreading psychogenic illness. For example, today we have TV, radio, magazines, internet, social media, all that. It can spread information very efficiently, very quickly. Okay. Compared to like things like the Middle Ages. So in the Middle Ages, we had the dancing manias that went crisscrossed over Europe, and it took 200 years for this psychogenic illness to move across Europe, because the method of informational influence was slow. We're talking about word of mouth, we're talking about newspapers, we're talking about, very slow of getting from town to town. So it was a span over 200 years. If you have something that you think could be mass psychogenic illness that could be spread around the world, that could be done literally in seconds to minutes, today, because of the reach that we have with informational spread. Right now, just like it has a very powerful role in spreading psychogenic illness, it can also cure it almost instantaneously. It can stop it in its tracks because you introduce a logical explanation for something that's ambiguous. It's the same idea as like, oh, you see something in the sky, everybody's seeing this color or this shape, and they're like, oh my God, it's aliens. But if you have a very logical explanation that makes sense, you can stop that fear pretty immediately, because you're like, no, it was just, look, it was this, I don't know, rocket launch, and maybe they have information about that. People are like, oh, okay. Now you're going to have still some people that's going to believe it, but generally speaking, the majority are going to say, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? Because we're always looking for explanations. I got something in chat here. Hold on. Okay, so this is okay. So I'm going to read this because this is funny. Mass psychogenic illness reminds me of an episode of SpongeBob from when I was a kid. SpongeBob's pet snail was biting people because he had a splinter, but it was thought that it was some sort of illness that made people violent. I remember this episode, by the way. I feel like I saw it not too long ago. I've seen it before, and I remember seeing it not too long ago. The entire town in this episode descended into chaos with zombie-like hordes of the characters running around, even though nothing was wrong with them. It was a strange episode, but it's fascinating that they portrayed this psychological concept somewhat accurately. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I mean, they were literally talking about psychogenic illness in SpongeBob, because that's exactly how it happens. We have this very logical explanation. Gary had a splinter, right? And everyone freaked out because they didn't have an explanation. And so they thought, oh my God, the snail is biting somebody and everybody's going to get sick. It would be the same thing as if, for example, you had a pet cat, and that cat started biting people, and the cat just had an injured foot or something, and everyone's like, oh my goodness, we all have rabies, and then everybody starts getting sick. And then it turns out that nothing's wrong with the cat except for this hurt foot, and it was just acting out and it's fine. Then now everybody's, side effects are going to go away because they're like, oh, I guess I don't have rabies. I guess I'm just fine. I just have a cat bite, right? So how often does mass psychogenic illness happen? It does. I wouldn't say it happens like all the time, but it can be a frequent thing, just depending on what's going on. And these sorts of things depends on ambiguity. So, a lot of times these sort of psychogenic illnesses occur on a more local level, like a smaller level, like we would see, for example, with a school with a, purported gas leak. We see that happening quite often. Now, something big, large scale doesn't happen quite as often. It's still considered mass psychogenic illness because we have lots of people who are reporting symptoms, right? So even if you have a case where you have like 10 people saying that they feel ill, that is still going to be something that we're going to see. So for example, you might see it in like food poisoning. You might see it, somebody reports, eating at a restaurant, they don't feel well, and everybody's reporting that they don't feel well. Well, that person might have had something unrelated, and these other people are reporting that they must have food poisoning because they ate there too. So it actually happens pretty frequently, but not necessarily on the scale of like global, right? We're not seeing it quite that much. It has the capacity to happen though, for sure. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that? So usually as soon as we can have like a logical explanation, it usually clears up the situation pretty quickly. So any other questions about that? Give me a thumbs up if you feel pretty good about that. We'll move on to the next thing. Okay, so let's talk about the factors involved when a person is going to be more likely to conform to informational social influence. Remember, this is, you don't know what's going on, and you use the information around you to act, right? So if a situation is ambiguous, okay, ambiguity is a really crucial variable. So when you're uncertain, you're going to be more likely to be open to influence from others, because you don't know how to judge the situation, especially if you're in a particular situation where you aren't really sure what the right behaviors are. You're going to look to other people to act and to behave. The greater the uncertainty, the more reliance we're going to have on other people. So if it's something that's really, really, really uncertain, we're going to be more likely to conform. And this is that example, kind of bringing it back to that situation that happened during the Vietnam War. When we look at the people who conformed and the soldiers who fired on the village, a lot of those soldiers were very young people, 17, 18, 19 years old. They might have never been in a war zone before, barely ever shot a gun, very inexperienced. And so they're going to, this might have been their first combat situation where they're placed into this situation, and now they're like, oh my goodness, what do I do? We also see, and this is also not only a good example of ambiguity. These soldiers walking in didn't know what they were coming into. They just saw people firing, but it's also a crisis situation. Okay. And so when you're in a crisis situation, it's very quick, right? We don't have time to stop and think about the actions that we need to take. We just need to act very quickly, because sometimes it might be our life dependent on that, right? You might be scared or panicked, and you're going to see how other people are responding. And so you're going to tend to follow along. And of course, the problem is that we might imitate irrational behavior, and we're just kind of adding to the problem, right? And so, in those particular cases, we tend to also look at, is a person an expert, right? So for example, on those soldiers who were in Vietnam, or during the Vietnam War, it happened in Viet Cong, they may have been looking to a higher ranked officer, because that person's more experienced. But sometimes the problem is even the expert isn't acting appropriately, or they're misinterpreting the situation. So it can be dangerous to look. It's better than going with just everybody to look for an expert, but sometimes the expert isn't always doing the right thing as well. And in that particular situation where we had the soldiers who were, massacring this village, they were scared. They were panicked. It was a crisis situation because many of them had been told that sometimes villagers plant landmines and carry guns, and sometimes they attack American soldiers, because that had happened in other locations. And so they go in with this information. It's a very ambiguous situation. Even the higher ranked officers aren't doing the right thing, because they're scared and panicked as well. That is definitely a bad kind of mix, right? It's like a perfect storm of something really bad happening. Now, had the soldiers not been in a crisis situation, right, and had more time to sit and think about their actions, chances are that tragedy would have been avoided simply because they would have had time to stop and say, wait a second, what's going on here? Do I really want to do this? And many of those soldiers, really were very affected by that because, they felt terrible about, killing innocent people. So it's not like it kind of always comes back to, are humans inherently good people, or, are we just, have the capacity to kill when needed. And a lot of times there's always a debate of like Freud's man is wolf to man, what do we do for survival purposes? And we know that not everybody makes that decision. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes, why, and looking at certain examples of when people go against the grain. And we're going to get to that. Now, let's go back to this idea of looking at experts, right? And so when we have people who we deem as an expert, okay, we tend to look at their particular behavior. So let's give an example here. So let's say you're on a plane, okay, and you are, maybe it's your first time on a plane, or maybe you've only, been on a couple of plane rides and you're just not, you're not as confident. And you see, you're in the air. Okay, you're flying along at a very high altitude, and you look out the window and you see smoke coming from said plane that you're currently on in the air at a high altitude. What might be the first person you look at that you might deem as an expert in the situation to judge their reaction? So who might you look at if you're on a plane and you see smoke coming out of maybe like the engine? Whose reaction are you going to be probably focused on? So we have it in chat, the flight attendant, right? If they're panicked, you're probably going to panic, right? If they're freaking out and like, oh my God, it's smoke, okay? You're probably going to then be, pretty scared, okay? And chances are you're going to look at the flight attendants over your seatmate, unless you have determined that the person sitting next to you is potentially an expert flyer. Now, it could be that you've talked to that person and they are like, oh, I fly all the time, and you might deem them as more of an expert than you. So it is possible for you to look at other people's reaction. I mean, you're definitely going to look at other people's reactions, because if everybody's freaking out, but the flight attendant's calm, then everybody's going to stay calmer, right? It's when the flight attendant, when the expert in the room is starting to act like something's wrong, that's when everybody else is going to start getting really nervous. Okay. All right. Another great example here. If the pilot freaks out, yep, it's time to freak out. When the pilot is very obviously like not okay, then everybody else is going to be not okay. And, and that's who, so you're looking to the flight attendant. The flight attendant's looking to the pilot, right? So everybody's looking to the next person up, and the pilot is supposed to be literally the expert in the room or on the plane. And so that's kind of who we're all looking at. So usually we can't see the pilot, but if we could hear, in his voice or her voice that they sound very nervous, then we're probably going, it's like when they come over on the intercom, then we're probably going to be nervous as well, right? But as we have determined, experts aren't always reliable sources of information. We like to think that the more expertise or a knowledge a person has, and the more valuable that person's going to be as a guide in ambiguous situations. But, some people aren't as really good about controlling the way that they look and act. But, those individuals are trained. They're supposed to be trained to keep calm, even in very nervous situations. There was a situation where I was actually on a plane. It was a really late night flight. We were flying. It felt like we were flying in a circle. And if you've flown a lot, you kind of, it was at night, so it's hard to tell. But if you fly a lot, you start to like you can kind of feel when you're going in a circle. It feels different. It's really hard to describe. But if you're flying in daylight and you look out your window, you can tell that you're flying in a circular pattern. And it's, it's a broad circle. And a lot of times what pilots will do is they'll circle right before they land, because maybe like a terminal isn't open yet. And so you're just kind of buying time in the air. Obviously, you can't land if there's no place to land. And so I remember there was this particular time or it just felt like we were flying like in circles, and it was a really bad storm, and everybody was kind of like nervous and looking at each other, and the flight attendants were super chill, like, right, they were just like, oh, it's fine, we're just, we're waiting for a terminal to open because of the storm, and they're a little bit backed up. Okay, so it turns out after we landed, we found out that our plane had been struck by lightning. Okay, nobody knew on the plane except for the flight attendants and the pilot, and we couldn't land yet because because it was such a bad storm that they had closed the airport. And so if we'd known that in the air, I'm pretty positive that literally everybody on that flight would have freaked out. Hey, oh, by the way, guys, our plane just got hit by lightning. We're good though. There's certain information that you definitely don't want everybody on the plane to know. But the pilot and the flight attendants had such a very, calm demeanor, that nobody was nervous. And so, that's how you control the crowd, right? There's another really interesting example of this, where back in I believe it was 1940, it might have been the late 1930s, 1940. So at the time, the source of entertainment was radio, right? So everybody tunes into the station and they listen. And so there was a particular broadcast, which was Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. Now, if anybody's read this, okay, it is like very dystopian, like scary, Martian invasion story. Okay, when you're reading it, it's like, oh man, that would be crazy if that was happening. Now, the problem is that some people tuning in didn't know that it was a story. They thought this was a news broadcast of what was happening currently in the world, and it was that there were Martians that were invading the Earth. So when people are listening to the broadcast, a lot of people started freaking out because they were like, oh my God, it's the end of the world, right? And so people started calling into like police departments, and then the police departments didn't know. So people were calling into the police, and the police were like, what? We're being invaded. And so, you're looking to the expert to give you information. And so this was a crisis situation where people started really freaking out because they thought that, it was the end of the world. And so it was just a broadcast. They were just reading this story. So in this particular situation, this was very scary for a lot of people tuning in. And there were a lot of reports written on this about this sort of mass contagion, this fear that went across everybody because they didn't know that this was actually this is a fictional story, and that things weren't actually happening. And we're going to talk about situations where people had this happen and they didn't follow through with the fear, and I'll explain why in just a minute. And we're going to get to this later into the semester, but something that we're going to talk about is the bystander effect, or later into actually possibly some of this material. I can't remember if it's in this chapter or another chapter, but the bystander effect, when you're in a situation where you're looking around to see if people are asking for help, and you're assuming that people are asking for help, you tend to not call 911 if you think other people have already called. And so, an emergency or a crisis situation can sometimes cloud our thinking, and we make assumptions, right? We don't know if we can help or not, or if we even should bother. And sometimes what ends up happening is we choose not to help because we think it's covered. And so, that is also clouded by ambiguity as well. I've got another thing on chat here. Would another example of this be like when they tell doctors and nurses to keep their cool and don't use any words that could freak out patients or the patient's family? Absolutely. For people who do things like sonograms, x-rays, MRI scans, they're trained to keep very calm because they don't want to, like, for example, if you are in a situation where the technician sees something that is probably going to be bad news, they don't want to freak that person out. And sometimes it might be incorrect, so they don't want to scare somebody with their reaction and cause a fear contagion, because then everybody's going to start freaking out in the room. Instead, they wait for the doctor to be able to make sure that they can deliver the news appropriately with the right facts and information. Okay, so I've got something on chat here. My dad told me that some people were freaking out and saw lights over the horizon at night for that World of the Worlds broadcast. Absolutely. People were actually reporting that they were seeing things that were accurate with the broadcast when it wasn't true. It was just a fictional story being broadcast on the radio. Very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. We start to see things and hear things and think things that really aren't there because it's basically our mind playing tricks on us because we want to be right. And so because of that, we start interpreting every little ambiguous thing as lining up with the thing that we think is happening, right? So it could be that there was a plane going over during the broadcast and somebody looked outside and they were like, that's the spaceship. Oh my gosh, because their explanation is going to fit in with exactly what they think is happening, right? Their expectation. So absolutely, very good point there. Now, how is it that we can be in a situation and we can resist informational social influence, right? So we have to ask a few critical questions of ourselves. First of all, do I know more about what is going on, okay, than that person? Or do other people know any more about this situation than what I currently do? Okay. So stopping and asking yourself, what are the facts? What do we know? What's going on? Right. Do they know more than I do? Because it doesn't seem like they do. Right. So maybe they aren't interpreting this correctly. Is there an expert who should know more? Okay. And maybe see what they're doing. And so like if you're on a plane and you have a seatmate who's freaking out, ask yourself, maybe I should be looking to the flight attendant, or maybe I should be looking to the pilot's behavior. Do the actions of other people or the experts seem sensible? Does this make sense? Is this logical? And if I act the way that they're acting, if I follow through with what they're doing, and is this going to go against common sense, my common sense? Is this going to be immoral? Is this going to go against my moral compass? Is this going to go against my sense of right and wrong? Now, I'm going to give you guys, let's jump back to that example, looking at being able to resist illegitimate information, inaccurate information. If you just stop and think, we can resist this inaccurate informational social influence as long as we stop and think, right? When we are freaking out and not thinking, that's when we're going to be more likely to do something that might be immoral or wrong, or something that's against our common sense. In the situation where we had during the Vietnam War, those soldiers that opened fire, not everybody did this. Not every single soldier opened fire or engaged in combat. Okay, so I'll give you a couple examples. One sergeant said he'd been ordered to destroy the village, like literally, quote, destroy the village. Okay, and he refused to follow that order because it didn't feel right. Okay, so he went against his order because he stopped and thought, if I did this, is this going to be against my moral compass? And so he chose not to engage in firing on the village. Another soldier, watching people fire on civilians, okay, actually intentionally shot himself in the foot so that he would have an excuse to be evacuated from the scene. Okay, because again, he was like, this isn't right. And he actually engaged in hurting himself just so that he could be evacuated out, because he's like, this doesn't seem right. Okay. One helicopter pilot who looked down and saw the whole thing happening landed and rescued 15 Vietnamese children and actually ferried them off into a safer place further into the forest, because again, just not feeling right about the situation, actually was able to rescue several of the villagers. So the question is, do you have time to stop and think about what the right thing is to do? And, how do you, what questions should you be asking yourself in this particular situation to know, am I doing the right thing? Right. And so those people who listen to the War of the Worlds broadcast, right, some of them engaged in just simple problem solving. Right. They said, you know what, I'm going to check the other stations on the radio and see, is this, you'd think if we have Martians invading, it's probably going to be on more than one radio station, right? So they started going to different radio stations. They found that nobody else was broadcasting the same news. They were trying to do rational things that told them that first initial thought was probably wrong. So those individuals didn't panic because they realized, wait, there must be something else going on here. And so that's what's important in these situations, is to stop and think and ask yourself, does this make sense? Right? Now, I know a lot of times we don't have the time to do that, but the idea is that you try to make time for it so that you engage in the correct behavior. Now, we talked about informational social influence. So now let's kind of switch to normative social influence. So this is a different type of influence. And so what this is that the influence of other people is going to lead us to conform because we want to be liked and accepted by other humans, right? And so a lot of times what happens is this ends up resulting in public compliance, but not private acceptance. So social informational influence a lot of times leads to private acceptance because you just don't know. Whereas normative social influence a lot of times ends up that you may not privately accept what you're saying or what you're doing, but you're going to go along with it because you want to be going along with everybody else. So whether it is because you want to be liked, you want to be accepted, you don't want them to think you're stupid, whatever it might be, you're going to go along with the crowd. We know this because, we're a social species, right? We know that one of our basic needs is to feel a sense of belongingness. It's to feel acceptance from others. That is a very basic human need, and it's important for our well-being. It's important for, our development. It's very stressful and traumatic when we're rejected by others. And so, that is a lot of times the explanation for why we tend to go along with the crowd. Now, another important kind of concept here is this idea of social norms. So these are rules, right? These are rules that a group has for acceptable behaviors, for acceptable values and beliefs of its members. Sometimes these rules are spoken, right? These are kind of explicit rules where we know that we're supposed to follow this, and sometimes they're implicit, or they're sort of unspoken rules that we know that we're not allowed to go against the crowd or go against these rules because it might mean that we get rejected out of the group, right? And so we know that it's very important to have companionship. It's very important that we have this human contact. And so a lot of times we go along with these social norms, even if we don't agree with them, because we want to keep this sense of belongingness. So let's think about some groups, right? And this could be anything. It could be, college students, your age group. It could be living in Southwest Virginia. It could be living in America. What are some rules, whether spoken or not, that you really should follow given a particular group? So can some people give me some examples of social norms? Like, what are some things that, behaviors or values or something that you need to say or do or don't say or do based on a particular group? Smile back when someone smiles at you. That's the polite thing to do, right? What else? So what are some other spoken or unspoken social rules? Okay. We got say excuse me when you're passing someone closely. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Pointing is rude. Always say you're doing fine, even if you're not, when you're asked, right? Even if you're having a bad day and someone's like, how you doing? You're like, oh, I'm good. I'm fine. And you're dying inside. Yep. That is definitely something that we do. Because what happens if you go against a social norm, right? What if a stranger comes up to you in passing, they smile at you, you smile back. Okay. Rule number one, check. I smiled. And they're like, hey, how you doing? And you're like, oh my goodness, I am not doing fine. This is why I'm not doing fine. And then you go into about, a 5-minute situational rant of why you're not fine. What will happen in that situation, you think? People assume that you often overshare. Woo, okay. That person's oversharing. That's odd, right? Uh-huh. So are they going to think you might be weird or different or odd? She didn't go by the script. Very good. We have scripts. We have social scripts, and that person did not follow the script. Things are gonna get awkward. Very good. It's gonna feel weird, right? They're gonna assume they might walk off. You might be in the middle of explaining why you're not fine, and they're like, okay. And they might just walk off, right? Do you think that person's gonna approach you again if they ever see you again? Nope. Nope. They're going to be like, well, we're going to avoid that one. Okay. Even though you're telling the truth, and even though this is something that's happening in your life, in your body right now, and you just need to tell somebody, it's not an acceptable thing to do, right? It goes against, it's deviant, right? People don't like it. You could, somebody might say something rude to you. They might make fun of you. They could ridicule you. They could just literally walk away. They could reject you. And so, depending on how, deviant the behavior is, that person is going to react a certain way and it may be polite. And I'll be like, oh, okay, I hope it gets better. And they might be polite about it, but that does not mean that they don't think that you're an odd person, right? They're going to have certain thoughts that go through their head that's going to be, oh, this isn't a normal functioning human being, right? So we have these social norms, and that's why sometimes when you travel, this can be really difficult, because if you go to different countries, if you go into different cultures, if you go to different parts of the United States, you are going to experience different social norms. So saying yes ma'am, and yes sir, that's a Southern thing. It's also a military thing. If you go up north or in other places and you say yes ma'am, yes sir, you might actually be considered rude, because yes ma'am, yes sir is for older people, and they may think that you're calling them old, right? So these are definitely situations where you have to understand the social norms where you're at, and sometimes it doesn't match what you grew up with, right? Okay, so I know therapists often have issues with this. How are you doing today? I'm fine. Okay, excellent. Tell me what's been going on with you. Oh, my dog died. My anxiety's been through the roof, and my life is falling apart at my feet. Very interesting comment. That's exactly what happens, right? We're so trained in the script that we don't tend to say what's really going on, right? And you have to train people out of that. So if you want to go into counseling, that's something that you have to be mindful of. What are the scripts? What are the things that we're used to saying? And you got to break out that script, and it doesn't feel right, but that's sometimes rewording the question can help people come out of that script. So if you ask somebody, it does feel automatic, because that's a script that we've learned. So as a counselor or as a therapist, you don't start with the script, because we know that if you start with the script, what's going to happen? So if you start with the part of the script, what's going to happen to your client? They're just gonna continue the script. They're gonna say their part, right? They're gonna say their part in the scene. And so you need to make sure that you break out of that, because if not, you're never gonna get anywhere with your people. And you need to, make progress. So yeah, absolutely. But that's just because we've been built and conditioned for these social norms. And anytime we go outside the social norm, we will get punished for it. And so if you think about everything that we do, we're conditioned to do everything. How do you rephrase how are you when speaking to others to get an honest answer so they don't follow the script? This can be different based on the person. If it's somebody that and you want to kind of get at what they're experiencing, you would just need to phrase the question differently to something like, how have you been feeling recently? So, what's really been going on with your life? Or, maybe sometimes starting off script yourself, saying something like, hey, what, I've been really struggling lately. And then, explaining the situation, and then saying, how's your experience been? And so if you go off script, a lot of times you've basically said it's okay for them to go off script and to go against the social norm. So if you present it with that, instead of saying like, oh, I'm fine, how have you been? Then they know we're back on the script again. I got one here. I've experienced that yes, ma'am, yes, sir thing a lot when I moved around. It felt normal for me to say that because I'm from the South. But when I would say to other people in the West or North, they would actually get offended and they think I was rude from then on. Yeah, absolutely. Because that social norm being, for example, in the Midwest or more like Northwest and North, saying yes, ma'am, yes, sir, unless it's on like a military base, usually does not get, it is not well accepted because it's considered something that you do for like elderly people, you know, and so you want to make sure that you're not offending anybody, and that's really hard to do. It's really hard not to offend somebody when you're in somebody else's territory. So, you know, and then sometimes asking like, oh, you know, or explaining, I'm from the South, you know, that's, you know, I apologize. That's just in my vernacular, you know, kind of making people aware that you're not trying to be offensive. This is just the way that, you know, you're used to talking and being open about that conversation. Now, let's talk about an example of when we have situations where people experience this normative social influence and don't like to go against the grain. So Asch's line judgment studies is a series of studies, really interesting stuff, where people demonstrated that they were conforming to a crowd, even though they knew that the answer was incorrect. Okay. So typically I like to do this in the classroom. So it's unfortunate we don't have the whole class. And even if we did have the whole class, it's something really interesting to set up. So you have to have a lot of people to do this. So what this is essentially an experiment where you have like a panel, right? And so you might have 5 people, and it varies depending on the type of experiment. So this has been done with just like 2 or 3 people all the way up to 7 or 8 people. So, you know, if you have a panel of like 4 or 5 people, and what the experiment is that you are given a line. Okay, so you're given this reference line. So this line right here, you're told this is the line that I want you to measure everything against. Okay, so you see a slide where you see the line, and then you get a slide of comparison lines together. So you'll have 1, 2, and 3. So tell me, just from looking at this, what line most closely matches the comparison line? So just looking like this, if I had to ask you 1, 2, or 3, which one most closely matches the standard line? So if you had to answer, so put it in chat. Is it 1, 2, or 3 that most closely matches the standard line? What's funny is I could actually recreate this experiment right now. That's what's really funny. I'm not going to, but you need to pre-plan it. But I realize now I could have just, I could have done this one on Zoom. Okay, so everybody's saying 2. 2 is correct. 2 is the right answer. It is the line that most closely matches the standard line. In the real experiment, there's 1 participant and there's several Confederates. So let's say we have, okay, so in class, we have 25 people in class right now, okay, on Zoom right now. Let's say that I told maybe like 20 of you to say the wrong answer. Okay. So if I said to you, yep, you got it on chat. Somebody just said, would it involve telling a group of people to pick 1 or 3? If I told 20 of you to pick 1, the answer 1, which is very obviously the wrong answer, that would lead 5 of you not knowing what's going on and being like, wait a second, why is everybody saying 1? It looks like it's 2. And then you do this number. You're like, and you're like looking and you're like, but it's obviously 2. Why is everybody saying 1? And then what are you going to do? So if I asked you that question and on chat, everybody put 1 instead of the very clearly right answer, 2, how many of you would say 1? What do you think? What's the likelihood of you doing that? Everybody on chat put 1 as the answer. 20 out of 25 people were putting 1. What would you, and I had them all answer first. What would you put? Would you put the correct answer, or would you put 1 to follow the crowd? Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so somebody said they wouldn't answer their answer anonymously. Okay, we're going to circle back to that because that's an important point. Everybody knows your name. Everybody sees your answer. So this is not an anonymous answer. This is everybody sees your name, or you're in the room and you pick it. Okay. You never explained why we were using the word Confederate. Is there a reason? So a Confederate is a person who's in on the experiment. Okay. So if 20 of you, I told you before the experiment, I need you to pick answer 1, you were in on it, you are a Confederate. If I told one of you, if one of you were just explaining the experiment and you don't know anybody's in on it, you're a participant. Okay. So I explained this term last class and at the beginning of this class. So Confederate is a person who's in on it. So if I told 20 of you, hey, we're going to do this experiment and I want you to pick answer 1, even though it's obviously incorrect, that's a Confederate. That's a person who's in on it. So a lot of you say, I probably would go ahead and pick 1. So tell me, why would you do that? Like, it's wrong. So you're not privately accepting this information. It's incorrect. Why would you choose the wrong answer? Okay, wouldn't want to stand out because everyone else is, and I don't want to stand out. That's usually the reason why. Maybe my perception is off somehow. You start questioning yourself. You question, did I understand the rules correctly? Is something wrong with my eyes? You feel the peer pressure. And we're going to get back to that. That was a really good comment. Okay, so let's look back to this study. Okay. So in this Asch's line experiment study is called the line judgment study. It's a series of studies, and we're going to talk about the differences in them. So you have that box where you evaluate, you have a standard line and you have all these other lines, and you have to evaluate which one closely matches it, right? And so in a lot of the trials, a Confederate's going to give the wrong answer, okay? Because that's what they're told to do. The participant doesn't understand this. They don't know that someone's in on it. So what happens is that you do this, hold on one second. Okay, and what happens is that I think it's like 76% of the time, and on at least one trial, these groups of people were saying the wrong answer, knowing that it was the wrong answer. Okay, so here, this is an unambiguous study. It's very clearly the wrong answer. Okay. And between, so looking at the breakup of trials, so only about 24% of participants never conformed, even on any trial. They said no, the answer's 2, and they give it correct every single time. So out of all of the trials, about only less than 25% of people will not conform. No. That is the wrong answer. I don't care what those people are saying. This is the answer. Okay. Now that means that 76% of people are going to conform at least during one trial. And here we have over 10% conforming to lots of trials, like almost the entire experiment, right? So a lot of times what we see is that somebody isn't feeling comfortable, and so they'll conform some of the time, and then sometimes they'll give the right answer. But almost everybody does it, right? It's a huge percentage of people who will actually conform, even though they know the answer is wrong. So this is a screenshot of one of the videos of the actual Asch's line experiment. What I want you to do, can you guys guess out of these 3 people, who was the participant? Don't look at the words. Just guess based off of body language. Who is the participant? So there's 2 Confederates and there's 1 participant. Who is not in on this study? Number 6, the man in the middle, right? The man in the middle. Why? Why do you think this person is the participant? What does their body language tell you? They seem engaged. They're dressed differently. That's a good point. That's a really good observation. That's probably a problem. He looks concerned. The other 2 are relaxed. He looks anxious. Okay. He is pulled up looking at, he's like, what? Like, he is confused. He's looking up and going, are my eyes playing tricks on me? His posture seems to be thinking, what is wrong with these people, right? So what was happening in this situation, and they did so many different variations of this, right? So they tried it with like 2 Confederates or 6 Confederates. They tried it with 1 participant, 2 participants. They did like literally every iteration you can imagine. And in some cases, they would have the Confederates look at the participant every time he gave the actual correct answer, but it was against the other answers, and be like, giving him like nasty looks and being like, what's wrong with you? And really kind of punishing the participant in a way of being like, why are you giving this incorrect answer? And so do you think that's going to make a person more or likely to conform? Do you think if they're getting this feedback from other participants that they're an idiot, do you think that's going to make them continue to conform, or do you think that's going to make them want to go against the grain? So if they say the correct answer out loud, the answer's 2, and everyone's like, ugh, what's wrong with him? Are they going to continue going against the grain, or do you think they're going to be more likely to conform as time goes on? If they visibly see people irritated with them. They're going to change your answer. Exactly. They're going to be much more likely to conform because now they are getting a feedback from the participants that, oh my goodness, they think I'm an idiot. And so that's going to kind of come back and hit their self-esteem a lot, right? It's going to conform unless they already knew and disliked the one who's looking at them funny. Yeah. And in this cases, it should be all strangers. So they actually don't know the individuals. But yeah, you are going to be more likely to confirm if you're being punished for the fact that you are going against the grain. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So what are some reasons why we go, and conform, right? So we don't want to feel weird. You guys have already told me that in the experiment that we did at the beginning of last week, where all of you answered and said, I'm here. And, and we did that kind of little experiment at the beginning of class. You all even said, I don't want to feel peculiar. I don't feel like a fool. I don't, want people to think I'm an idiot, or maybe I thought I missed something. Right. And so, even with complete strangers, we don't want to look stupid. We do care what other people think. And we don't want people to think that we don't know what we're doing and don't know what we're talking about. Even if we know that we're never going to see those people ever again, we still want approval from them. Okay. And so this is, kind of an important factor because this predicts how we're going to behave in certain situations. Okay, so alternatively, I would fear in the line study that the others would think I thought they were dumb, and I'd feel bad if I went consistently against them. Absolutely. So that's another factor. You care about what they think about you and what you think about them. And so you don't want them to think that you think they're stupid because they're answering incorrectly, right? And you'd be like, oh no, I'm going to give this one to them, right? Let's go with 1 because that seems right. So when you change the factors on this experiment, we actually see differences in behaviors. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Now, what happens in this experiment here, this normative social influences causes us to conform, and it results in public compliance. So we are actively going with answer 1, even though we know that the true answer is 2. We're going along with it, even though it's incorrect. So it does not result in private acceptance. You're like, this is not an ambiguous situation. I know the answer's 2, but I'm going along with answer 1 because I don't want to feel weird. I don't want them to think I'm dumb. I don't want to think they're dumb, sort of thing. So that results in public compliance without private acceptance. Now, in situations where there is a very ambiguous experiment, where we're just not sure, there's another example of an experiment we're going to talk about in a minute where it's ambiguous. That's when you're just not sure, you will actually privately accept it. But in this example, super not ambiguous. You know what the answer is, and you're choosing to go with the wrong answer because of normative social influence. Now, when we do variations of this study, for example, and there was a really good comment earlier, if I knew it was anonymous, I would go with the right answer. Okay. When they made the answers anonymous, written on paper versus saying out loud, when the answers were private and not public, very few conformed. Okay. When people didn't have to worry about the likelihood of somebody, hearing their answer, okay, they were not likely to conform. Okay. And so that conformity dropped from to an average of only 1.5 of the 12 trials. Very, very few actually conformed in that situation. And so one really interesting observation, and I'm going to read you this quote from one of the papers that were written in 1985 from this. So the Asch studies are one of the most dramatic illustrations of conformity, of blindly going along with the group, even when the individual realizes that by doing so, he turns his back on reality and truth. Even though he knows it's not right, the participants still went against the correct answer. So this is just a really interesting example. The last thing I want to talk about to kind of summarize what we've done here, and then next class we'll get into consequences of social informative normative social influence. Last thing I want to talk about is the fact that we want to be accurate. Now, Asch's study, there were very unambiguous stimuli. It was a clear right or wrong answer. And these, you measured these lines. This is where we saw conformity, participants agreed, and it resulted in public compliance because they wanted to be accepted, but they didn't privately accept the answer. Sheriff did a series of studies where it's a really ambiguous light and you can't really tell where it's going. And so participants were much more likely to conform because instead of wanting to go with the group because they wanted to be accepted, they just didn't know the answer. And so they wanted to know what was right. So to fill that need, they actually privately accepted that, yeah, that's probably the right answer because I don't know, because it's so ambiguous. Okay, so I'll cover that a little bit. I'll start back over with that just so that we're clear on that next class. We just hit time. So I want to give a chance for anybody clear up any questions, and then we will pick back up on this on Thursday. So does anybody have any questions for me? Remember, we're going to do class on Thursday. Next week is self-study.